Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another year of the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Science Seminar Series. And normally at this stage I would step back and introduce the introducer, but as well as being the Associate Dean of Research, I'm also Chair of NICL. And so it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Christine Rawluk, who is the coordinator for NICL. So Christine is the Research and Development Coordinator for the National Centre for Livestock and the Environment. Her primary role in this coordination role is to foster the development of research aimed at improving the environmental and social and overall sustainability of food systems. Christine's also responsible for spreading awareness of research findings through a variety of focused programs for high school students. She's a graduate of the Environmental Sciences program at the U of M, but she also has an MSc in Agriculture, which she obtained jointly supervised by Geza Rax in the Department of Soil Science and Cindy Grant from AAFC. So with this background, Christine is a firm believer that a cross-disciplinary approach is key to developing solutions that bring long-term benefits to both farmers and to the environment. So please welcome Christine.
Well, thanks everyone. When Martin asked me if I wanted to speak at faculty seminar, I said yes. I hadn't been asked before, and I've been here for quite a while, so I was really excited. So maybe I got a little ambitious, and I said, well, let's do the whole history of nickel. And then as I started thinking about what I was going to talk about, I went, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Anyway, so what I'm presenting to you today is a lot of material, but I've tried to kind of package it in a way that hopefully you see the relevance of what we've been doing with nickel, and you can kind of see that evolution over time since our beginning. I just wanted to say that since everything that we do with nickel is sort of a team effort, this presentation was no exception. I had several people spending quite a bit of time with me trying to help formulate how to package things and make sure that I did it in a nice, concise manner, so thank you to them. And then again, sticking along with that multi-people kind of scope, I just wanted to also preface the talk with saying that there's so many others that have been involved in what we do, and so what I'm presenting today is really the result of many people being involved, this recognition that, you know, I've got my role and I come in mostly at the front and at the back end of the projects with some sprinkling in between, but it's really, there's so many people on the ground making research happen. And so you'll notice as I go through my presentation today, there's really not a lot of people, I'm not really showing a lot of people, and I just wanted to say this up front, that those people are what makes this happen. So just a little bit of what I'm going to cover today. Just a little bit of background on nickel in case some of you aren't familiar with it, what my role is, and just sharing a few examples of different ways that we're applying the nickel model and different approaches we've taken to answering some specific, addressing some of the specific challenges that have arisen and opportunities that have arisen over the last number of years. So, and really why I took on this opportunity to give this talk is really to share what we're doing and just get people thinking about where we can go from here by bringing to the table, you know, all the expertise that, say, people like you in this room have. So a little bit about the beginnings of nickel, which happened before I arrived on the scene. It was initially called CALPS, and I'm not going to read through that because I'll mess it up. But it was this CFI proposal that really had this vision for how people should be coming together to address the grand challenges that were on the horizon for the livestock industry on the environment front. And interestingly enough, you know, reading through that CFI proposal, those challenges outlined that time back at early 2000s, they're still the challenges that we're facing today, and we're still working on solutions and addressing them. And even more so today, we're seeing the influence of those social drivers of how they're influencing what happens on farms around our province and across Canada. So this CALPS came about really, it was this infrastructure to help facilitate doing that type of research and using kind of a multidisciplinary systems-based approach to addressing these challenges. So this was the original nickel model, and really it's around integrating livestock production systems with crop production systems. So looking at inputs into and outputs from each of those systems and how there's flow in between those two systems. And so since I came on board, there has been kind of an evolution in that model. I came into the scene around 2008, and so we've had 2 chairs with nickel since that time period, Don Flayton and Martin Scanlon. And so what you're seeing here is kind of their influences over time and kind of reframing maybe how we can apply the nickel model to the research that we do. This is just kind of a simplified version where we kind of look at it as kind of a dynamic model. We can be looking at parts of it or be looking at the whole system and investigating those areas within the system. So for the focus for today's talk, I'm really sticking to those first 2, farm viability and environmental stewardship. So just as a way to kind of hive off a manageable amount that I can present to you today. So the approach that we've taken to research is, that I did allude to, it's whole systems based, using that model. And really it's team based. To be able to tackle those big questions and work in that systems model takes a number of people bringing different expertise to the table. And so that's lots of different researchers. Then there's lots of other organizations involved. So pretty much without exception, all the projects I'll feature here, there's industry engagement. Either they're putting money, skin in the game, or they're involved on the ground or in some capacity with the research project, very invested in what we're doing. And then we work very closely with those on the extension side of things who are going to be ultimately taking that information that researchers put out there and kind of finding ways that they can be encouraging farmers, producers to put it into practice on the land. So with that approach, it starts by asking, how can we help? And I'll get into that a little bit more later on. So why take this approach to research in the first place? I think that all of you have probably got the message by now that really that's what is the expectation. We're hearing that from funding agencies, anyone involved in the last cluster go around and the cluster before that. There's this strong emphasis on joining forces, right, with anyone else working in that similar realm to get the most out of the effort that you're putting into something. It's the same university, central administration, we're getting that same message, putting together these strategic research themes that you see multiple people contributing towards, and again, our partners. So it really does make sense. The only problem is that it's complicated, right? There's a lot of moving parts. The more people you have involved in something, just naturally, the more complex it tends to be. And then the bigger the projects seem to be. And so that ends up that then you often need multiple sources of funding. I think gone are the days where you have a project that just has a single source of dollars. You're looking at bringing in multiple sources of dollars, and that just adds another layer of complexity to it in terms of just coordination and project management and the administrative burden of managing those projects. So that's kind of where I come in. I wear a number of different hats, so anyone who's worked directly with me knows that we ask that question, how can we help? And then you say, oh, well, I think that you can help by doing this. And then I try to do that. So it's a variety of different capacities, front end, back end with communicating our results, and then communication at the front end, trying to bring people together to really put some strong research into action. So it's been said I do a little bit of this sometimes. And that's okay, because I really like cats. In fact, my cat was helping me put the finishing touches on this last night. At least I think he thinks he was helping me. He was just getting me hairy. And then communications. I'll talk a little bit more about this towards the end of my talk, just giving you some examples of how we're communicating what we're doing. And communicating with students is one aspect of it, and that's just a picture of me communicating with some students. So into the research side, I'm going to spend the rest of the talk just talking about some of the research that we're doing in different theme areas, just to show different ways that we're applying the model and coming together to help. So the first model, just want to make sure I watch my time, is really taking that initial nickel model and putting it into practice. And so this first project actually was happening before the nickel infrastructure was even fully established. And so that's the Broquerie long-term project that was held out at, that was out on a farm, obviously in Broquerie, where they're looking at applying hog manure to either hayland or pasture and grazing cattle on it, and looking at how the efficiency of that system, looking at the environmental impact of that system, and as well just the movement of pathogens, greenhouse gases, economics. So really this project saw every single department in our faculty represented on the ground, each doing their part. That was before HNS came on board. So, and like I said, with these large projects, there ends up being a large number of partners, and so this is not an exception. This had a lot of heavy engagement with those on the extension side. Lots of excitement around the project, bringing people out to the site to see it. And so briefly, just some of the outcomes. There's lots of traffic out there, lots of media coverage. There's some HQP came out of there, and 11 papers in 8 different journals. And so those were kind of a mixture of unidisciplinary publications as well as systems-based publications. And so I think that was a bit of a journey, as well as writing papers for submission to systems-based journals. So I've just put up a few examples of the type of publications that came out of this site. And the last one I think came out as recently as 2014, 2016. So even though that project was started in 2003, there's been many, many years of publications coming out of it. So for the second example, I wanted to just touch on how multiple stakeholders came together to address, I guess, a real pressing challenge facing industry. So this was kind of a joint effort beyond just researchers, and it was around manure phosphorus balance. So around the time, I think it was mid to late 2000s, there's a realization that nitrogen-based nutrient management regulations weren't necessarily preventing phosphorus buildup in the soil, particularly when it came to manure application. So the province decided to put in place phosphorus-based nutrient management regulations. And so for livestock producers, particularly in some regions of the province, this was a real concern, because where there's a density of livestock production, there is more of a likelihood that there might not be enough land to keep the soil nitrogen or the soil limits within this new phosphorus scheme here. So nickel, along with a number of other, we'll call them stakeholders, came together to host a 2-day workshop around achieving manure P balance. And so this was us working very closely with MLMMI, with at the time, the Manitoba Manure Management Advisory Committee. Manitoba Port Council was a partner at the table, as well as Manitoba Agriculture, which at the time was called MAFRE. And really the purpose of having this workshop was to share kind of what is the current state of knowledge on whatever management practices are available to use on farm, whether they're in place here or available elsewhere. And to really, for everyone that was there, and it was very well attended, I say, there's manure applicators there, there was all of the different livestock species groups were there, so many producers were there, it was really well attended. And everyone got together to really think about what are the research and extension gaps that we need to address, and what does that look like for different producers. And so what came out of it is this range and different areas of focus for developing management strategies. And as you can see by this lovely diagram that Dawn produced, the solutions vary in complexity. And so whether or not you're just looking at maybe feed management strategies depends on, it might be a bit different than under what circumstances you'd be considering moving to manure treatment, which is seen as a much more kind of expensive approach to trying to get a handle on nutrients. So what I'm going to share with you is a bit of research that we've been doing specifically on the crop and land management side and on the manure treatment side. So for those of you who aren't familiar, we have established a long-term manure and crop management field laboratory out at Glenlee, and that's been in place since 2007. And really this study was set up to see how well those nutrient management regulations were performing. So the base study was set up that there was nitrogen-based application rates and phosphorus-based application rates on 2 different cropping systems. And then over time, we looked at what's happening to those nutrients in the soil, specifically nitrogen and phosphorus. What's their availability over time? Are they accumulating in the soil? How well do these manures perform compared to synthetic fertilizer? And we used multiple sources of manure, all the forms that were produced at Glenlee Research Station. So the first number of years was looking at using those regulations, and then the last few years have switched focus on strategies for drawing down the phosphorus levels in the soil. And so a lot of the information coming out of here is directly of use for those that are maybe looking at regulations or looking at the formula that's used to calculate how much manure you apply. And so we've still got ongoing information coming out of those sites. So, and there's lots of other field research that was going on, but that was just one that I wanted to highlight. And then in terms of manure treatment, at the time, right around the time that we were doing that workshop, he had also put together a proposal to Western diversification. And in a partnership with Manitoba Pork, we were able to secure $1 million that went towards establishing this agricultural byproducts processing facility, which really just expanded the capacity in Manitoba to process both solid and liquid forms of manure. And so the timing of this couldn't be better because it was right at that time that MLMMI was looking to fund research, kind of evaluating different manure treatment technologies to see what might be a feasible strategy for using here in Manitoba. So not only was this infrastructure and this facility used for facilitating research, it was also used kind of as a hub for extension events and getting out the word on what we were learning as we were going along through this process. So I did want to just highlight one research partnership that I thought was a bit unique and worth featuring. So as with often happens when you go to build something, everything doesn't fall into place perfectly along the timeline, right? So we ran into a situation where we had our equipment, but we didn't have a facility to install it into. Then once we got into discussion with PAMI, we found a solution. And so in the end, what happened was this equipment was actually taken to a few farms around the province where they tested it on site with those production systems to see how well it was working at taking out the phosphorus with the solid manure. So that's a solid liquid centrifuge in the background there. And so with their doing that work on site, it actually provided an opportunity to do some piggybacking of additional research, because not only were we asking the questions, how well does this technology work? We needed to know, well, what's the economics of putting this into place on a farm in Manitoba, but then also what do you do with those different product streams that are coming out of that treatment system? So there was quite a bit of work done on the separated manure solids, looking at its agronomic performance, looking at ways of stabilizing the material. On the liquid manure side, there's investigations looking at, can you kind of pull out that remaining phosphorus as a fertilizer and use that for crop production. Okay, so on to this third example. I hope my time's okay here. This was an approach where a number of projects were kind of under one umbrella theme, and that theme was greenhouse gas mitigation. So the focus here was kind of this win-win scenario, looking at beneficial management practices that would both increase efficiency and at the same time decrease greenhouse gas emissions. So there's kind of three, I guess, hubs of research focus. And so that would be looking at strategies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions from cropland systems, looking at reducing it from cattle production systems, particularly cow-calf production systems, and then conducting different whole farm assessments to see how well maybe beneficial management practice strategies are working, or what different production systems, what their overall emissions might look like. So just very briefly on the crop side of things, looking at BMPs around fertilizer and manure management. Various projects looking at applying the 4R strategy, looking at the form of nitrogen fertilizer, looking at the rate of application, how it's applied, and the timing of its application, to see if there's specific strategies that come to light as good strategies for not only improving the use efficiency of that fertilizer, but also reducing the nitrous oxide emissions associated with it. On the manure management side, there's a variety of studies underway or that have taken place looking at quantifying what are the greenhouse gas emissions coming out of systems where manure has been applied, and what are some BMPs that might be applicable. So there's both short and long-term studies looking at this, looking at both solid and liquid forms of manure under different cropping systems. So I'll just say, if you are really keen to learn a lot more about all this greenhouse gas work, you could always check back to our faculty seminar recordings and watch Brian Amiro's presentation from last January. That'll give you all the details if you're interested. So just continuing then on the crop side, just looking at land management. So there's studies done looking at converting annual cropland into perennial cropland and vice versa. And so what are the changes in greenhouse gases that occur when that happens? Looking at landscape and soil management influences on greenhouse gas emissions, as well as what are the carbon dynamics that are taking place when you say convert a perennial land pasture into annual cropland. So on the cattle research side, there's just been a large body of work. Actually recently I was asked to kind of pull together for CFI a report of all the greenhouse gas research activity that has happened by those involved in nickel. And over the last 12 to 15 years, it totaled up to like $10.5 million worth of research that has been done. We have some excellent expertise at this university, and I think we have a really good reputation for the greenhouse gas work that is done both on the soils and crop side and on the cattle side. So a variety of different aspects that we're looking at improving cattle efficiency through feed management, grazing strategies, looking specifically at extended grazing systems and overwintering systems. And I also just wanted to point to another key project that was done was in 2011, a survey of beef production practices across the prairies. Now that survey, not only has there been multiple publications that have come out of it, but it's actually been used in many different studies, either modeling studies to get a better understanding of what, say, greenhouse gas emissions are based on different ecoregions across Canada, but also it's most recently been used in the work led out of AAFC and with partnerships here at the U of M in establishing the environmental footprint of beef production in Canada. And just a fun fact, in the publication that came out of that in 2015 in the Canadian Journal of Animal Science was the most downloaded manuscript of the year. So, woo! I think that's a really big deal. And then just finally doing those whole farm greenhouse gas assessments through either direct measurement or using estimation models to run simulations for different production systems and to kind of look at how effective different beneficial management practices might be. And the nickel website has a full listing of all the publications that have come out of the greenhouse gas research, so you could always look there if there's a specific study you wanted to learn more about. So getting to that umbrella theme, We've been successful in securing 2 large grants through the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada Agricultural Greenhouse Gases Program. And they're both looking at beneficial management practices for cow-calf production systems. So I'll just give you a quick little background there. So this first one, the grant was over $3 million. It ran from 2011 to 2016. And just judging by the size of the grant, you could just imagine the scope of the research. But so it involved 14 researchers, many other partners involved, and it was specifically looking at those greenhouse gases from the crop production side and from the livestock production side that I presented to you a bit earlier. So there's many projects involved in that umbrella funding. So coming out of that were 34 publications, 12 graduate students, and then a wide information sharing, I guess, of the results. On the industry side, a number of fact sheets came out with specific beneficial management practices around nitrogen fertilizer management, cropland management, as well as livestock management, both feed and animal management. Again, those are available on the website if you're interested in looking at them in more detail. And the current AGGP project that is just in its first year was kind of building on the findings from the first grant. And again, this involves multiple researchers, multiple universities, and slightly smaller budget, but still large if you think about it at 1.9 million. And the purpose of this is looking at again, that win-win scenario where we're improving efficiency while at the same time reducing greenhouse gas emissions, looking specifically at dietary strategies and manure and bedding management strategies, and looking at when that manure is applied in field, what's happening with greenhouse gas emissions. And so those will be looked at kind of separately, but then also this project is looking at the potential of if you stack those different management scenarios, do you end up getting greater benefit than if you were just to implement one or the other. Okay, on to this final research example. This example kind of shows the shift that we've been kind of making over the last few years from this focus on the environment to kind of include also social sustainability aspects. And that takes it kind of beyond our faculty so that it has to be, it's more of a, we'll call it transdisciplinary approach and kind of multi-faculty. So this kind of all started just around the time that the university had pulled together teams to try to develop strategic areas for the next, I don't know if it was 5 years or whatever the period was. So one of those themes, strategic research themes, was the safe, healthy, just, sustainable food systems thrust, if you could say, thrust area. So that was, I think, established in 2014. And so in just having discussions with a variety of people involved in that initiative, and at the same time, connecting with the Office of Sustainability, kind of arrived at this idea, well, what about having a university-wide event to see who wants to come out and talk about a little bit about what they're doing, and just kind of continue that, I guess, or build on that initial momentum of bringing that group together to talk about that strategic research theme. And so a number of us got together to plan this day, and so it involved, like I said, the Office of Sustainability. It also involved representation from NRI. The Campus Food Strategy Group, a student group, was at the table helping us in planning. And then also Annette Desmarais from the Faculty of Arts. So I think some of you were at that day. But really we were looking at 3 areas: research, education, and campus action, and we had it set up so that folks could kind of talk a little bit about what they were doing, share what work they were doing in food systems, but also we had areas where we could capture participants' input as to what they thought would be important for us to be thinking of as a university in terms of food system sustainability. So what happened next, we had really good participation that day. You know, we had over 8 faculties represented, so that really shows you that thinking about food systems goes farther beyond our faculty, right? And so what came out of this next is we were actually invited to present our strategy at one of the ADRRLO meetings. And really, at that time, I think that this was the first concerted effort to kind of build upon those initial meetings of developing those research themes. So ORS and the VP's office were interested in seeing, well, what was our approach and where were we thinking of taking this in the coming period. So we did that, and then we've done a few other things since that time that I'll get into in a little bit more detail, including putting together a CFI proposal, as well as establishing a food systems research group formally. So I think this started potentially as back as far as 2015, but we put together a proposal for CFI around that model. So a whole bunch of people came together to think about, well, if we're taking food all the way from the animal to the human, so to speak, what are all the steps along the way, and what might that research model look like in trying to connect dairy production to processing in the human interface. So we decided to use dairy as this model of how we could be integrating this food system. And so really it was that first exercise in kind of extending that nickel concept or that model through all the way to consumption. And so it was a pretty ambitious CFI proposal. It was $12 million. And as you know, that's a very competitive process, and we were not successful. But what we got out of it really was a model that we can use to develop our dairy research program here at the University of Manitoba, or also a model that we can use with other commodities to move forward. And so this, I think we had multiple, I can't think of the number now, but multiple faculties engaged in this as well, including ASPR on the side of entrepreneurship. So most recently, well, the proposal is recent, but we've been working on this for a little while now, coming together a few times, this group that's really interested in this, the strategic research theme around safe, healthy, just, and sustainable food systems. We've come together to put forward a proposal to formally establish the group. And so that has a representation from a number of people who were at those initial theme building exercises and who have come and participated in the various other meetings that we've had since then. And really the focus of this group, at least initially, is to just help build a knowledge base and share information about who's doing what in the food systems realm, and really engage those who are interested in building partnerships to take their research to the next level or broaden up the scope of their research. And then it also has a student training element to it. And so this proposal has 4 faculties represented on it right now, and we're looking to, of course, build that over time. And just a little promo for the director of this group. Ian Davidson Hunt, he's actually giving the seminar here on November 15th for that faculty seminar. So most recently, right now, we're looking still at building this capacity for nickel on the human resources side and broadening engagement. So we currently have a proposal for a CRC tier chair. Or sorry, we're currently advertising for a CRC tier chair in integrative analysis for sustainable food systems. And then on something kind of totally different, just looking at engaging students on the subject of sustainable food systems. So looking at can we bring students from different faculties together to explore this topic. So in November, we're planning a joint session with the Environmental Sciences program to have kind of an information sharing session, full day workshop for students. And so I'm looking for faculty that want to help me work on this, and also to help in the recruiting of students to participate in the program or in the workshop. So I just wanted to mention a little bit about public trust, since it's very top of mind, I think, lately for agriculture for sure. We're seeing a lot of mounting public influence and interest in how food is produced. And so we've really seen the agriculture community come together, kind of galvanized around this idea of telling our story. And so we're seeing that being embraced at the university and through the Farm and Food Discovery Center, for example. They have the Real Dirt on Farming program that they run. Within the programs that our students are being offered here, there's a growing emphasis on being able to communicate with people about food and agriculture. So an example there is that last year we held a workshop on Find Your Voice, so where we brought out communication experts and had them spend time with students going through exercises to just help them find different ways that they can be communicating about agriculture. So on the research side, this is kind of still building on that work that we're doing on the extending kind of to the food systems. We've been engaging with social scientists and on marketing and business development side of things to just really get a better understanding of what moves and motivates people and consumers, and then, you know, through communicating with industry, help have a better way, better understanding of what might be industry's response strategy to the increasing attention from the general public. So that, I thought, would be a nice segue into kind of reaching out, since we're talking about public trust. The communication that I'm involved with facilitating or putting into place really has kind of two streams. So one is kind of communicating to the public and to students through programming. The other is communicating our research outcomes to industry. So in terms of just communicating with the public, we have special events that we host. We have special programs that we've developed for high school students. For example, Science, Engineering, and Technology Day. We've developed a program where we talk about greenhouse gases in agriculture systems, and students actually get to come out and, you know, put their hand inside a cow's rumen and feel what's in there, what they're digesting, and then look at what organisms are in that rumen material, and then they get to see measure greenhouse gases in soil and look at carbon in plants. And so really we're just trying to teach them about, or just expose them to the science that's involved in agriculture. And then we also have a program where we have students come out. They're looking at, they do a program every year looking at global food security. And so we look at ways of kind of connecting that big issue at a landscape level, talking about nutrient security for global food security. And this year, since this is very topical, we're actually doing the role of soil health, I guess, in global food security. Through the Greenhouse Gases program, a large number of resources were developed for teachers, for grade school kids all the way up to high school, and those are all available out at the Farm and Food Discovery Center. And then, as I mentioned, you know, we look at holding seminars that would be of good public interest. And so this is Jeffrey Fitzpatrick Stillwell, who is the manager of sustainability with McDonald's Restaurants of Canada. And he came and spoke to us right at the time that he was kind of going, I guess mostly Western Canada, visiting with beef producers as Manitoba, or as McDonald's was developing their sustainable beef program. So in terms of what we do on the producer side, I've been involved in hosting a number of workshops, clinics, field days, usually in collaboration with industry and then extension specialists on the ground. I regularly prepare and submit articles to producer journals, and I also help coordinate submissions and offer editing for articles that people want to submit. And then again, on more, we bring in people to speak to more, I guess, research interest topics. So both of these, you know, are kind of looking at that food production system and looking at those social sustainability questions that we're getting. So this one, I wanted to highlight this AIA green paper that we put together as kind of a flip side of, you know, with nickel we're asking how can we help, and this is actually kind of the other way around. It's kind of can you help us? And so recognition of the expertise that that we're building here led the Alberta Institute of Agrologists to approach us to put together this green paper looking at, you know, kind of this future visioning, what might agriculture look like in 2050, taking into consideration climate change that we're seeing taking place. And so this effort brought together 23 individuals from academia and industry and government, just putting down their thoughts on what they thought might happen with agriculture going forward from a variety of different perspectives. And so this policy document has received considerable attention, and it has resulted in numerous requests for presentations, as well as requests to republish some of the essays that are featured in this document. So what might nickel look like for the next 10 years? I hope that through this talk I've demonstrated that this nickel model, or the approach that we are taking to research, is working. So by having kind of a dynamic and adaptable model, it allows us to look at different opportunities or challenges through different lenses, and by kind of having this diversity, by having kind of an open membership where people can come and go as they like, just working on specific projects with nickel, it kind of blends this resiliency to what we're doing. So just kind of looking at this evolution over this period, you know, we've gone kind of expanding from environment to include the human element. We've seen the grants that we're securing are getting larger, and we're building larger teams, and then there's just been kind of this snowball effect, I think. And so I will leave you with this of going back to where can we go from here in addressing the next grand challenges that will be facing the livestock industry and agriculture over the next 10 years. I must have been motoring because we got good time.
So, who's got the next grand challenge for Christine to solve? Well, any questions? Right.
So Christine, I don't know, like on my newsfeed on the weekend on my phone, I see the Phosphorus Lake Winnipeg thing getting a bunch of press again. People sort of engaging us again about that, because there's some quotes about agriculture, even though it's mostly in the Dakotas, but still a mixture, Manitoba, and other places. Are we getting sort of asked questions by the press, any other groups? Nothing recent?
I haven't heard anything specifically, but those questions would generally go out to the researchers that are physically doing that research, though, right? But you know, it's curious, for the number of times I've engaged with students in different programs that I've been involved with out at the Discovery Center, some of them are clueless that there's any problem with Lake Winnipeg, and I find that is very surprising, because we just assume, right, because we're confronted with it all the time, that everyone's thinking about it, but maybe that's not the case.
As you described 4 different types of projects, Christine, one of them you characterized by the nature of the partnership. There's government, industry, and academia, I believe. I realize that you don't necessarily form those partnerships, you get what comes to you. But is there a particular nature of partnership that is emerging as the most effective one for you, and if so, why?
I would say that the nature of the partnership really would depend on the unique set of circumstances surrounding whatever it is we're looking at addressing. So if you think about the manure phosphorus challenge, it was an immediate concern for everyone. So everyone was very heavily invested. Everyone was very eager to work together on figuring out how best that they can be addressing it and getting the information out as quickly as possible. And so there might be another area that we're looking at where we want to have the same groups represented at the table, but maybe it's not as much of a priority for one of those groups, and it might be a bit harder to engage them and get their time. And so I think there has to, again, be this flexibility and adaptability in how we approach things, and recognize that just because maybe you've laid out a table setting for someone, they're not necessarily going to be there, but maybe someone else wants to come in and take that place. So, and that's, that's kind of the model, right? It's an open membership, and so there isn't a set structure that has to be in place for every project that we do or every program that we're looking at.
Karen?
Maybe a follow-up to that question. When I think about how, as a sector, the grand sector, everything's around agriculture, food production, processing, distribution, and the importance in terms of both local and international trust in the food that we're producing, can we proceed? Can we even proceed without having all stakeholders at the table?
Well, usually to get full buy-in, right, you need everyone at the table.
It's a great question. And I'll tell you the reason I asked it. Okay, I was just fortunate enough to be part of a Manitoba mission to the Netherlands on water technology. And the Netherlands has obviously decided that when it comes to advancing water technology, you only do it one way, and that's with those three partners at the table. And it seems to be working rather well for them. And so it's just, I just wondered if, I knew that you didn't have a choice. Okay, you get what comes to you and you try to make it work. But I thought something might be kind of emerging for you in terms of, what works best. When you have to actually look down the road. It's not just the initial product, but the effect that the product has as well. That's kind of where my thoughts were going.
Well, and I wouldn't say that it's a scenario where we're really forced to work with different groups, and that not so much you get what you get, right? It's just kind of, well, I guess it is, you get what you get, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? There's always a way to work with whatever's whatever you're given.
Any other questions for Christine?
Over the 10 years, have you seen an increase in the consumer being an influencer in types of research that are being pursued? I think the consumer's always been there, but the public trust element and the public engagement element seems to be stronger in more recent times.
Definitely, and so, the conversations we've been having with folks from other faculties, right? It's what can we do together? We know this is really important, but what are the right questions to be asking? What is the information really that we need? And so those conversations are happening. It's just taking time, and then it's also taking time finding the right group to go to apply for funding, right? And formulating that research question, because a lot of that consumer stuff, commodity groups are addressing themselves, right? And they're taking great strides in kind of trying to figure out what's the best way that they can be responding as a sector. But there is definitely a role for research. We're just trying to figure that out, and that's where we really need to be kind of looking beyond that comfort zone. If we're used to working in say the natural sciences, or just an applied sciences, well, that social sciences side of things, and business management and marketing, that's kind of outside our realm. So you have to have those conversations to figure out what questions they would ask from their expertise, right? And then see where you can kind of come together and join the two. So it's a work in progress, but definitely we're trying to figure it out.
Martin?
Thanks, Christine. Really impressive amount of work that was done. Going back to the beginning, it was called an agroecological model, and I wonder if I think it would be really interesting to go and using the definition of agroecology as a filter to actually push all those ideas that have been practiced over the last 10 years through that, see what sort of principles have been sort of learned or strengthened or discovered. And I wondered if that's, you asked for thoughts, and that's mine.
Thank you, Martin. That's good.
I'll ask a question, because you said a lot about transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research. What's the biggest impediment to multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary research that you've come across to sort of getting these teams working effectively together?
Well, a general statement in terms of getting teams together is people are really busy, and so getting anyone to the table is, it takes time, and that's, we experienced that with that food systems research group, right? And the other challenge is again, just there is so much value in everyone bringing their different perspective and approach to the table, but then it's figuring out how do you take all those different approaches and perspectives and find a way to work together. And as we again get beyond our realm of familiarity, right, it just takes it takes more time and more effort to arrive there. Not that we've necessarily arrived there, right? We're just especially just kind of starting out down that road on the transdisciplinary side.
John?
We're going to invite you to give one more sales pitch for this November workshop. What are you looking for? Can you give us just a sketch of what the workshop entails and what you're looking for in terms of engagement from people here?
Sure. So I'm working with this gentleman here, Sheldon McLeod. He has instructed in the environmental science program for a number of years, and I've worked with Sheldon in the past, and so really it's set up as kind of a professional development day, really for students, and it's for students in environmental science. And he approached me and said, well, it would be really neat if we could get ag students involved as well. And so really the day is about getting students to think critically about our food system. What are the different components of it? What are those challenges and opportunities around kind of making it more sustainable? And it's looking at it from the Manitoba context. So what food do we produce here, and looking at those production systems. And so we're looking at having a full day Saturday workshop where students are kind of tasked, I wish I had my notes with me, but tasked with determining what are some key priorities or challenges, and then developing those out. And just we're looking at having kind of diverse groups working together and to try and just for there to be learning on both sides from each other, and then learning about that whole system. And then we're also going to have a panel of experts with some folks here represented on that panel to kind of help guide the students and give them some feedback on what they're presenting or what they've developed. Do you want to maybe put that more eloquently, Sheldon?
No, I can't, but I would add one thing. And I'm just a sessional lecturer over at environmental sciences, so don't equate me with the faculty. But
I said instructor.
I would say that one of the goals from the environmental sciences perspective is to help those students see and understand some of the practicalities, and to realize that there needs to be a lot of give and take in this, and you have to be open, you have to understand that everybody around the table has something useful to say, and that needs to be taken into account. So those are some of the goals from the other side.
And you'd like, I think, some people there to act as resource people. Like, I don't think it's going to be a lecture format; it's going to be a workshop format.
Yes, it's a workshop format.
Willing to be accessible to the students to help out.
So we've already recruited you and Martin for those roles. Well, what really I would benefit from, and we would both benefit from, it is for those that are teaching classes. I'm personally not teaching classes. To if you have ideas of really what would be a good format or ways that we can be engaging students in our faculty, and then also help in identifying potential students that might want to commit a day to see the value in committing a whole day to it. Looking specifically at third and fourth year students, we're looking at around 12 from each faculty, and what what that looks like from our faculty, I'm not sure, because we've got, you know, eight different departments. 7? Did I get?
One final question for Christine. Come.
Are we looking at changing the name again for nickel and something else? I'm going back a little bit to the history. I think before CHELS was formed, I think there was a group actually called the Manure Group. And that probably is an unofficial group, and that probably got into the state of CFI proposal to council. Then changed the National Center to nickel. Now I'm looking at your model picture. So that first one you showed was basically sort of a logo for nickel. And now it's sort of evolving into something different, more even broader now, including food or sustainable food production inside the system.
Well,
I guess maybe you're thinking about a new name.
Yeah, that comes up every once in a while, for sure. You know, thinking of the fact that we've got livestock and the environment in the title, right, that you're beholden to, do you have to just deal with that, right? And so, you know, when we tried, we'll just call it NCLE, and would that work? And I don't know that it's worth spending so much energy on, right, on that name. Let's just go with whatever we're doing, just continue to do what we're doing, because you're going to get so many different opinions about what it should be and what it could do, right, based on its name, and I don't want the name to be what limits it. So that's me speaking personally.
Maybe April 1, when we have a new chair from Biosystems Engineering, Nicole, that chair could change the name. Thanks very much, Christine, for a great presentation.